from terms of mental health, also, we are not designed to sit in front of the TV, right, and just veg. That's just, as a people, we aren't. We're social people. Like, that's how we were built, whether you believe that scientifically or you believe it religiously, like I do. Like, we're not meant to just be isolationist ourselves. We're meant to be doing things, especially, and I'll speak to the male side, like that's how we develop, we grow, like we relate to people side by side to doing things. And so that's, in terms of mental health, like if you feel like you need a purpose, running a business, you can do a whole lot of things within purpose. The challenges that I want to speak to is how can you do that and not be worried about putting meals on the table?
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Justin Boyle, aka Jay, who is known as a highly motivational and transformational speaker and coach. After leaving active duty military service, he spent years bouncing around corporate America before finding his super strength as a leader and performance expert. He founded his company Charge Forward as a way to help people find their inner strengths and use actionable performance systems that allow them to grow personally and professionally. One thing he learned was the power of communication, and he is now using it to help people spread their message and use their expertise to impact the world at the highest level. He's on a mission to help the helpers, and the mantra is to dream fearlessly, overcome obstacles, and become victorious. Justin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It's an honor to be here. Like, you're allowing me to come on to your show and you're reaching people, letting people share their story. I know lots of people out there are, they're having their own challenges, and allowing people to have a space to feel safe and see that they're not alone, and that there is a next step for them, even if it doesn't feel hopeful at that moment, is awesome. So I am honored to be invited onto the show with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think especially as we head into the season, like I don't know exactly when this episode is going to release off the top of my head, but in a few weeks, we're going to be switching from kind of spring to summer mode. And so I think as we change seasons, regardless of what season it is and where we live, what part of the country, I know you're more in the mid part of the country. I'm from there originally myself, Iowa, a little further north than you. But, anytime there's kind of a change, it's like the shift where it's like, I don't know, like the shedding of the last season and onto the new one. And yeah, I think it's really awesome and perfect timing to have you on here today talking about what you do and sharing your story. So very appreciative of that. Before I pass it off to you to share your story, I just wanted to kind of set the foundation for the episode today and ask you, there's one word or a few words you could use to describe how you are feeling going into this recording today. How would you describe that?
That's a fun question. I would say, the words that I use anytime that I get to go on a stage of any kind, and I consider this a stage, it's excitement, right? There, I think a lot of people get nervous, and I think in some ways I still get nervous, even though I've done it all the time. But the reason is because it's exciting. You get to talk about like awesome different kinds of conversations and how it can help other people. And just the coach in me, I'm a problem solver at heart, as many men, especially former military, are. And so getting to talk about the problems that we face and how we solve them is just fun for me. So I would say excited.
That. I've been hearing excitement a lot lately, which is awesome. And then I also think you mentioned nervousness can sometimes be felt, but also I've heard people reframing that feeling of nervousness as excitement. That was actually a tip that was given to me a few years back, of anytime you feel nervous or anxious, just tell yourself it's excitement, and it just reframes it in your brain. So I like that you brought that up, but I'm going to pass it off to you now so that you can share your story, what is that you do, and any other value you want to add in there with the listeners today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for so at the front end of what I've been doing now, right? I got out of the military in 2013. And as you said, I was bouncing around corporate, and I certainly had great opportunities. I never struggled to find work, but I never really quite felt like I was having my fit, right? How like when you're in the military, they kind of tell you where to go. And then just through osmosis, you kind of just become that thing, whether you're in the mechanic world or you're in logistics or you're in the, infantry or combat arms or whatever. Like, you just kind of become part of that and it becomes who you are. And then we all have this shared sense of value. And as many times when I was doing more one-on-one like performance style coaching, many times people just kind of lose what their why is after leaving the military. And that was what was happening to me. So I was just never happy anywhere. I was certainly skilled and had all kinds of, I just couldn't quite put my hands on what should I be doing. And that's what led me. And I think many people finally decide that they're going to not be part of a corporate structure and launch their own business. Same thing happened to me. I don't think I'm unique in that way, that's the decision that I made. And also not unique, as you find when you try to get into business of any kind, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's all kinds of new things to learn. So, but my thing was getting into coaching, right? I was lucky enough, and kind of the flashpoint of that is when I was at, I don't know, my third job in 4 different years at different companies, getting invited to go to a self-development experience. It was like a multi-day, like 12-hour days for like 4 days, kind of like a boot camp, if you will. And seeing speakers on stage and having them train people on different ways to think about purpose and, mental clarity and energy and productivity. I'm sitting there and it's awesome. It's amazing stuff. If you've ever been to one, I encourage you to go to one if you haven't been to one. I'm sitting there going, these are all things I learned in the military. This is all stuff that I know. And literally seeing it transform people made me go, oh, this is what I loved about being a leader in the military, was getting to help people achieve their goals. And I was like, I could do that. And then, Charge Forward was born then. It's a little bit different than what it was back in 2017 when I launched it. But at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here. And it's just so much fun to do, because now I started to be able to do business that was also attached to my own personal mission, which is fun. Have you ever have that, like when your professional life is actually paired up with what you feel like your purpose in life is? You ever felt that, Rachel?
Yeah. I mean, that's really what I'm working on a lot of now. And when you talked about when you're in the military and you're just kind of given this position, right? Like I was an aviation electronics technician. I never in a million years would have looked at a book of jobs and been like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to work on avionics. That sounds really exciting. And I remember even before I left for boot camp, and my recruiter, who was also an AT, was like, keep your mind open. You might really like it. Cause I'm like, I want this job. I mean, there were aspects that I liked, but it's like you said, you're just kind of thrown into it and you just find your place because you don't really have any other choice. And you just
out of necessity, you get skilled in it.
Exactly. And so, that's the thing. When I left the military, I did not want to feel like I was working somewhere out of necessity. And so I'm kind of going through that process right now, actually.
Well, so the necessity is great to help you just do what you got to do, right? If you accept that that's the necessity in the moment. What really drives that and how you can have meaning being an avionics technician, even if that's not your passion, but you can have fulfillment in that, is because of the shared values that's in the military. Right. The military is a very values first organization, although it's needs, and there's all kinds of different things people might tell you about the hard things about being in the military. They really much beat into you. Hey, we have these certain values and standards, and this is how we're all going to operate. Like I knew way more about my soldiers that I worked with than I ever knew about anybody I worked with in corporate.
Right.
Because it was very much more values first, and we cared about the people.
Yeah.
And so you can get fulfillment out of whether you're a technician or you're a high level leader. It doesn't matter. It can be very, very fulfilling. Absolutely. And that doesn't exist as easy outside of that military structure, because you have a lot of different people with a lot of different values, and they're not always driving the same place. So when I've coached people in their career, that was one of their number one struggles. It wasn't necessarily how much money they made. It wasn't necessarily, if they were able to be productive, is they just didn't feel like it mattered.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of people get into business. And so what I would love to kind of transition, share with you, the challenge is when you get into business, and I think everybody should at some point have some kind of business, maybe not your full-time thing. It could be your side gig or whatever, but you definitely have a lot to give to the world. And it's harder to do that when you are serving somebody else's mission. And so even if it's a side hustle, I encourage everybody, at least the skills that you gain and the impact you can have running your own business is absolutely what you should do. The challenge then becomes you have to now learn different things like marketing. You have to learn sales. You have to learn all these other different components to running a business. When you have a job, you focus on the job, and that's what you're doing, right? And so it's a little bit different skill set. And in my case, in being like an online consultant or coach, it gets really challenging to find clients because it's something that's new, it's a little bit more personal, and it can be very challenging to deal with the constant state of feeling like you're not good enough when someone says no to your offer. And that's the real crux of the issues. They're really saying no, they're not ready for what you're putting in front of them, but it's very hard not to take it personally because it's such like, I'm the coach, so you're saying no to the offer. And so when you're in that space, you have to find different ways to gamify that where it's not personal and you can separate yourself from it. And so I started to go, it's a whole lot more fun when this is working, but I don't want to have to grind my way to make sales. I don't want to have to go to networking events. I don't want to have to run advertising. I don't want to have to take constant sales calls. And I was like, what's a way that I could easily cut through all that noise and I could actually grow my business and scale at the same time? So many people will say, hey, you can start your business. You've probably even seen ads for this. I don't know if you've seen this. You can like, hey, you can launch this kind of business and make 10K a month or 20K a month or 30K a month, right?
Oh yeah, all over the place.
And they're not scams. They're true. People do them, right? Not everybody is successful with them, but they absolutely can work, but they have their own challenges. And the problem with like, say, 10K a month, especially in today's economy, is that's not a ton of money. And so what do you then do? What if I told you, Rachel, you could actually launch your business and generate $50,000 or $100,000 per month, and you don't have to take sales calls or run a funnel and sell products over and over and over and over again. You could literally just do something that actually generated all the capital that you needed to run your business effectively so that you can then have enough capital to reinvest in it to help it grow. Right? Like, wouldn't that be cool if you could do that?
That's the dream. And
Right.
to kind of stop you a little bit here, I think that some people might listen to this episode and think, okay, well, how does this relate to mental health? And so I just want to kind of bring it back a little bit for the listeners that are tuning into this episode, because there's a lot of people that stay in the military because they feel like there's no other choice. And there's a lot of people that stay in the military for 20, 30 years of their life and become very unhappy because the advice that they're getting is from other people who are in the military who have never experienced life outside of that. And so it's very hard for a lot of active duty. And I find myself in the same struggle too, where you say 50K months and it's so hard to wrap the brain around when the most I ever made was 6K months in the military. And
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of people out there that are like that. And, the safe place, the comfortable place is the military. And like the military is not a secure job. Like it is, but it isn't.
No job
right?
is.
Right.
No
right.
job
Like
is.
anyone could
Yeah.
decide in the Pentagon someday, you know what, we want to cut half the army. We're going to get
Right.
rid of these people. And they've done it in the past. Right. And so there goes the job security. And yes, there is disability through the VA. That's great. Yes, there are other benefits. That's great. But at the same time, like when you talk about purpose, because I think that's for me where most of it lies, it's not necessarily in the dollar amount. It's in how do I work in my purpose? I think that this conversation really brings that all full circle. And so I just wanted to throw that in there because I know there's going to be people listening that are like, wait a minute, like this isn't our standard episode. What are we talking about here? So
let me relate that back to health, like mental health. I think we both agree. Like if I wanted to improve my health, it takes an investment of some kind to do so.
Absolutely.
Right? I have to invest in the right kinds of nutrition. I have to invest my time and effort into taking care of my health, whether physical or mental. Right? And there's investments that you have to make.
Absolutely.
And the same thing happens when it comes to like, I think, financial health. Imagine your mental health and you have no ability to generate the income to solve those kinds of problems. Right. A therapist, while you might be able to do that when you're active duty, although there are challenges when you don't get to choose who that therapist is.
Right.
Right. But when you're outside of it, that's not all given to you. Right. When you're a veteran, there's all kinds of resources, but there's also, you get what you pay for. So if you are, most people who would tell you who are like the world's most successful people, if they need that kind of help, they go get it and they make sure that they invest properly.
Right.
And so, but if you don't have the flexibility to invest, then what do you do? Right. Do you just sit with it? Like how many times do you know somebody who just didn't go to the doctor because they didn't want to pay a copay?
Yep.
When if they would just invest in the copay to go get the medicine that they need, they could be back up to 100% a lot quicker. And then they could reinvest that energy somewhere else.
Right.
But I get it. When you've only got, say, $50 in the bank account, it's hard. So what I'm talking about is like from terms of mental health. Also, we are not designed to sit in front of the TV, right, and just veg. That's just, as a people, we aren't. We're social people. Like that's how we were built, whether you believe that scientifically or you believe it religiously, like I do. Like we're not meant to just be isolationist ourselves. We're meant to be doing things, especially, and I'll speak to the male side. Like that's how we develop, we grow, like we relate to people side by side to doing things. And so that's in terms of mental health. Like if you feel like you need a purpose, running a business, you can do a whole lot of things within purpose. The challenges that I want to speak to is how can you do that and not be worried about putting meals on the table, right? That's what I'm speaking to. Does that help kind of connect those dots into it?
Yeah,
I definitely want it to be purposeful too.
And I understand it. I just know that there's probably going to be people that are a little confused because this isn't, I think that anytime finances are brought up for most people, I can't say all, but for most people that are in like your standard middle class America, which the military often falls under that.
Sure.
It's an uncomfortable conversation. People don't want to talk about people that are making $50K a month because a lot of times the conversation goes to, oh, well, there's greed and there's the whole money mindset is a whole other conversation. And those are things that people often are not taught. And so, I think of when you say start a side hustle, the people that I know that were incredibly successful when they got out of the military, a lot of them did start that side hustle, whether it be real estate or something else while they were still active duty. So they still had that security blanket of active duty, the income's coming in, but they started tapping into that discomfort of building a business while they still had something in their mind to fall back on. And so I hope that anyone that is listening to this today really pays attention, because having something else that is a skill in your mind, or just learning about who to talk to about building that skill, is absolutely huge, and not only impacts your mental health, but can impact the mental health generations down the line. So thank you so much though thank you for that little explanatory second, because I really feel like it's needed for the people that really like just can't fully wrap their mind around it. So I'll let you continue with what
I'm going to ask you. I know I already have your permission just because we're talking here, and you can keep me in check. It's your show. I want to make sure I respect that. But I'm asking your listeners, as you listen going forward, I want to ask your permission for us to just talk about things in a real way. Money is a part of it. It's not everything, right? I think that there are certain, like I have a quadrant for like what satisfaction looks like, and the money would really only fit into maybe a fourth of the puzzle. Right. There's other aspects to you, like who you are, like what's exciting, like your passions, what's your values, your fulfillments, your skill sets. Right. And the money comes in there, but it is important. Right. We've all been there. We've all been there where, hey, I've only made 6K in a month before. Right. And sometimes, and right now, and listen, the things are more expensive. Yeah. That would change the puzzle for you. There is nothing wrong with however you're producing. But I believe, and this is just what I believe religiously, if it's okay for me to share, I believe that we were all called to multiply. And multiplication doesn't just mean have more kids. I've got 2 kids myself, and that's great, and maybe more in the future. But we're also called to multiply in different ways, which is why I do what I do now. It allows us to multiply our impact in the world, whether you want to do that from a faith-based perspective or you just want to help people. You can do that. And what I love about the military community is all of us had an MOS. I mean, you did have a specialty and you have an expertise in you that you could provide value to other people. So the things that I talk about is like, you can absolutely take that and you can run a business only around those things if you want to, and you can do it the way that you can best do it. And I think that's amazing. I think it's fun. That's why I do what I do. And it's super fun. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Go for it. Well, I'm all about it. So go for it.
Well, so what I was saying, like, how could I do this where I didn't have to struggle? Right. I don't want to be at the poverty line. I want to have a business, but I don't want to have up and downs. How can I control that? And so I started to go, what's the straight line? What's the path? How can all of this get done quickly? And what I realized was doing a business where it required me to talk to people one-on-one in order to make money was not efficient, because I only have so much time in the day. And especially if you are doing like say you're offering a service, or you're a consultant, or you do coaching or something that's not going to be like $100. It's something like, say, like you're like an air conditioning installation company, right? It's going to cost $10,000 or more for somebody to hire you. Well, that's hard to do if you're doing that with a conversation. So what I was saying, well, what if you could do it in a way that allowed you to talk to many people at a time and show them the value that you can provide, and then invite them if they want to take the next step with you in a way that's totally ethical and doesn't feel salesy at all, and you don't have to take a single sales call. That's really what I was introduced to. And what we started to learn was you could do that through online virtual events in the same way that I went to a 4-day in-person experience and saw them invite people to either invest in their business or invest in themselves to get what they wanted. You could actually do that virtually. And it was so fun. And I don't know what the makeup of the entire audience is, but I know in the Army, when I was going through, everybody had to learn FM 7-8, which is rifle and infantry platoon tactics. And one of the tactics in there was like how to run an ambush. And the whole point of that is to get an objective done and actually plan things out such that you are so successful you can be on the objective for less than 10 minutes and be out of there and do what you're supposed to do. Now, it's maybe a little bit of a weird analogy to use in this case because we're talking about helping people, right? But we could do that with a virtual experience right from your home, from wherever you are, talking about the things that you only know or that you're an expert in already, and have fun and actually provide value to people. And for some of the people that come, they're going to want more, because if they're willing to come to do that, they want to learn it. And a lot of people want the help and they'll actually ask to do so. And that's where we learn that virtual event experience. Am I speaking in a way that like you're tracking with me? I just want to make sure that before I keep going, because I can start to geek out and get into the weeds a little bit.
So I am very familiar with the world of virtual events and personal development. I attended Tony Robbins UPW virtually, and I love that stuff. And I know not a lot of people have. And you already said earlier, I encourage people, you encourage people, I also do, to attend these events if they have the ability to. And the reason is because A, they are super motivating and inspiring, but B, that proximity around other people who are where you want to be. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten in my life is don't take advice from someone who is not or has not been where you want to be. And so to get in a room with other people who are just wanting to be better in life is already just a step up. And so I am definitely tracking.
Yeah. So that was where kind of the birthplace of this was. And so what we found is, and we kind of have, I started to develop, so because I ran this myself, I was like, okay, I'm tired of bringing people in. I had a career coaching program where we're helping people find their purpose and find their ability to take their skill sets and their values and passions, apply it to their career, and actually land a job that actually fit all of those things and also paid them appropriately based on their skill levels. And we're like, how can we do this? And we just ran a workshop all around that. And we gave away the entire program at an event. We just said, we're going to show everything. And we did it. And we spent an entire day with everyone in there. And we made an offer. We said, hey, if you want help further implementation, you can join our program. Here's what it is. And 40% of the people there wanted to take the next step and join the program. It's, oh my gosh, this is better than when I was taking one-on-one free consultations to see, like, just to be able to help people. What it meant was that I got to help 40% of that room actually achieve the goal. That's what was exciting about it. And I was like, oh, we could do this as a business. And so we actually developed a framework and a process to help anybody do that, whether they already have a business or they would just like to do one. And so we just take your expertise and actually package together an ability for you to start a business based around that expertise and run an event to launch that and be able to scale your business as much as you want. Because once we know it's working, then it just scales however you want it to go. And again, I want to encourage everybody, if you're listening to this, it's not about greed or the money, it's about helping more and more people, right? So when we talk big numbers, that means more people got the result that they wanted to get to. And that's the fun part about it. Is that making sense? I just want to check in with you again, Rachel. I like us to be a back and forth and get your input here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that model is so impactful because I can't tell you how many times I see on the internet people that are like, hey, I need a side hustle. I need some other money. And a lot of these people are active duty. I'm part of the Sisters in Service page on Facebook, and a lot of single parents, a lot of, people going through divorces, or maybe just a large family, and the military is just not paying enough. And it causes so much stress. I think there was a statistic I read one time that said if families could bring in an extra $500 a month, that would save a lot of couples from divorce. And that's $500. A lot of people are out there side hustling with like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats or a Lyft or Uber, but a lot of those things are still taking time and not within a lot of, especially moms' values, because a lot of moms have values of spending time with their kids and their families, and active duty alone or a job alone can take away a lot of time. And the beauty of a business is that it allows that time flexibility that so many people want. And I think when you talk about an easy way or easier way, I don't want to say easy because I don't want to make it sound like any part of business is like super easy, right? But when you talk about a way that we can cut time off the clock for scaling, that alone is huge. And maybe if you're listening and you haven't ever built a business, you don't fully understand, and that's okay. But those beginning stages of trying to launch and scale a business, which, like I said, is what I'm going through right now, it is so tough mentally to get past that mindset of I can do this and it's okay. Like I give myself permission to do this, because we really do get that mindset in the military that can be very black and white and very linear of like, this is the task list of to-dos that I need to do. This is what I'm limited to. I do this, I get my paycheck. It's very like this, the black and whiteness of it. I don't really know how else to explain that, but
Yeah.
that mindset piece is so incredibly difficult to move past. And when you talk about military members make incredible entrepreneurs most of the time, because we already
Well, you've got
have
all the
those
skills. You're very
Yeah.
disciplined
Yeah.
by nature, right? You are willing to just get the work done. Let's say I got to work a little late. That doesn't bother most veterans. And listen, I like my downtime as much as anybody now. I'm a little bit older. I don't love to work, 18-hour days as much. But I understand if I need to, if I've got a promotion going on or something that we got to do, like we can go do that. And that's what makes
Right.
military really great at it, right? And it's
Right.
really super fun.
Right.
But I want to bring a concept and really what the birthplace of this was, the reason that this model works so well before I get in. And I'd be happy to, if you think it would be valuable, I'm happy to walk you through exactly how it looks. We can talk about it right here on this call. If that would be interesting to your audience, you let me know.
Okay.
But there's this idea in this concept. It's Benjamin Hardy, or I think it's Dr. Benjamin Hardy, wrote this book called 10X is better than 2X, right? Or 10X is easier than 2X. I don't know. Have you heard of that book before?
I have not. 10X seems to be a really popular term these days, but.
Right. There's like the 10X rule. There's 10X this, 10X that. But this book is called, I think it's called 10X is easier than 2X. I might be wrong. I think it's, but the author is Benjamin Hardy, for those of you who are interested. I don't get any affiliates, so just go look it up. It's a great book. The idea is it's actually easier for you to achieve in a 10X goal than it is a 2X goal. So let's just say right now, whoever's listening to this, I don't know what your job is. Let's say you're making, I'm just gonna make the math easier. Let's say you're making $10,000 a month in whatever job you're doing, or even your business. And if I wanted to double that, if I wanted to go from 10,000 to 20,000, or I wanted to go from 5,000 to 10,000, the natural tendency would be to do more of what you're already doing. Oh, if I just did a little bit more, if I just double my efforts, I'll get double the return. But the problem is that doubling your efforts is not fun. It's not easy to do. It will burn you out eventually. However, if I took my goal, let's say $10,000, and I wanted to make it $100,000, what I would do to double it won't be effective to get to 10X. What it means is I would have to do something radically different in order to achieve that goal. And that's where the fun part comes in. So if you just say, because what it does is it raises the frame on what you're able to do, which inherently, because a frame is 4 sides, the floor actually raises, means there's only a bottom level of, like you said, the things that you should be focusing on. And so that really generates, what are the strategies I should use? There is speaking of 10X, there was a television series on Discovery Channel, I think, called Undercover Billionaire. You ever heard of this show?
Yeah, was it Grant Cardone's?
Grant Cardone, and he'll talk about it till he goes blue in the face, right? The premise of the show, for those of you who haven't seen it, I think it's fascinating, and it's a reality show, so you don't know how much of it's actually real. But the premise of the show is they would take a billionaire and put him into some random town in America that they'd never been to, that's not a major metro, and make them wear like regular people clothes, give them an old beat up truck or car, and $100 cash and a cell phone with no contacts in it. They have to use a fake name. They're not allowed to leverage any of their previous engagements or anything. And in 90 days, they have to embed themselves in the community and generate a business that is valued at $1 million. Not necessarily has made $1 million, but is valued at $1 million if there's a difference, right? And if they don't hit that goal in 90 days, their commitment is that they'll put $1 million of their own money in it. So Grant Cardone, I'm going to use him as an example. His brand is called 10X, right? He's an effort guy, which is a little bit, I don't love the effort. I like to make things easy. Simpler is my way, right? But I can see some merit in the 10X. He was the only one different. There's 4 people that I know of that have gone through it. One person said that they were going, I think there's 2 guys and 2 gals did. The other 3, I think they generated, like, one was like a $750,000 business in 90 days. They get some independent evaluator to do it. I think one of them was like 1.1 and one of them was 1.6. All very impressive on their own right. Well, Grant, because he's 10X rule at the very beginning, he tells people, I'm going to try to generate a $10 million business. His business at the end, despite the fact that they shut him down due to COVID in the middle of his season, they made him leave. So all the momentum he built in the first couple of weeks was gone. Despite the fact that when he got back, he got COVID and had to be inside a house for like 2 other weeks. His business at the end was valued at $5.5 million.
Wow.
The only thing that I can, now they all had to invent whatever kind of business. They don't all just do what they were naturally good at. They would just decide what the community needed and try to build something. The only difference is that he aimed for 10 while the others aimed for 1. So he had to make decisions that would lead to potentially making 10. That's why he hit 5.5. Did he hit his goal? No, he didn't. But because he had his vision set higher, he did 5 times what everybody else did. And that's why I love the event model, because like, hey, I don't want to go make 1 sale. What if I could go and do something that would actually impact 10 people's lives or 100 people's lives instead of just 1 at a time? That's why this is fun. Isn't that cool? Like, isn't that just like that? To me, that's mind blowing. Right? And we have an actual example. We've taken all people who are more than capable of doing things, and only one of them did over 5 million.
Yeah.
While the other ones were hovering around 1 million, which again, 1 million is awesome. Right. It's amazing that that's can be done, right? But you can absolutely do that. It's not a fake thing. It is real. And we see people launch businesses and be very successful. And we also see people who launch them and you want to build it slowly, you're going to get slower results. That's why, hey, what if we could do something that is a 10X style mindset of thinking? Right. And then what would that do? Imagine your mental health when you generate a business that does $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 in 1 month.
Right.
What could you then do with that? Not only from a personal standpoint, but to the other people around you, what would that do for them? Right. And that's where the epic event strategy comes in.
So speaking of examples, because I think a lot of people are going to have a lot harder of a time wrapping their mind around like a Grant Cardone, right? Like most people aren't billionaires walking around day to day. $1 billion wouldn't be valued at what it is if everyone was. So let's take someone who is transitioning out of the military soon, let's say within the next 6 months. And they're in that mode where they're like, okay, what do I want to do next with my life? I feel like I could have the skills as an entrepreneur. I really don't want to work the same job that I worked in the military. Because let's be real, how many people you talk to them and their plan after the military is either go to school or work the same job if they can.
Mine less.
Right.
Mine less. That's what I did.
And so I want to speak to that person and maybe give a real life example of how they could make this model work for them.
Well, let me give a real example. It won't be necessarily a military example, but it'll be very much the same thing. And I can speak to this because obviously I was a transitioning veteran at one point.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm going to take my friend Dagan, who we actually did this with. Now, Dagan's not former military, and he'd been in business for a long time. Now he's a salesman. And what he's been doing is he's been selling things like insurance plans, right? So stuff that you have to have lots of meetings, and you don't make big money on every single sale. It's a lot of like, you have to constantly grind. And eventually over time, if you get into like insurance sales, there's this thing called residuals. And so that's how it can be a very lucrative career in the long run, because you can make residual income with it that stacks over time. Right. And so, but it's all well and good. It's fine. And he's really good at it. He's very skilled. He's very funny. Everybody who ever comes into contact with him, you can get it. Like, he's got a good energy about him. He'd made his money and was able to have that career because he's an expert at networking, right? He doesn't run ads. He doesn't buy leads. He doesn't cold call people. He networks for his income, and he's done well. He didn't make like $1 million doing it, but he just made a very liberal income, has many kids, married, and he's doing great. He wrote a book because people constantly asked him. They said, hey, how do you do this? And people were constantly asking him, like, how are you such a good network, or how are you able to do this? And so he just wrote a book about it. He just said, hey, I got tired of people asking me, so I thought I'd write a book so I can hand it out to people because I wanted to provide value to the marketplace. And he approached me and said, hey, I would love to maybe coach more on this and be able to train people. How could we do that? And I said, well, Dagan, you wrote a book. You should run an event. You should tell people about what you could do. What if you invited everybody in to learn everything that you put into the book? Now, you don't have to have written a book for those of you who haven't written a book. Okay. So don't get overwhelmed. It's not like an Amazon bestseller. Okay. He just has a book that he's able to give away. It's his expertise that really matters. And so we put an event together based on, hey, here's how you can grow your career or your business purely with networking. And we launched an event. We brought in 20 people from the internet. We just invited them totally organic. We didn't spend any money on advertising. We just shared it organically. 20 people decided to come to that workshop, and we just trained. I said, Dagan, talk about this. Dagan, talk about this part of your book. Dagan, talk about this part of your book. And we just served and we answered questions. And then we made an offer to everybody at the end. We said, hey, if you would like to personally work with Dagan, if you think he could help you, I invite you to apply to work with him. And 56% of the room, it wasn't exactly 20, but it was 56% what worked out. 56% of the room applied to work with him.
Wow.
Total strangers. He'd never had a program before. In fact, it didn't even exist. He launched it through the event. Yeah, and he filled up an entire coaching program overnight.
Wow.
Without a huge following. He doesn't have like 1 million followers. He's got like 2,000 Facebook friends, right? And so if he can do that, I know people come in the military because you guys are experts at something, whether you're experts in your craft, or you're experts in being leaders, or you're experts in how to be organized, you're experts in how to operate in a stressful environment. How many people you know that had to go deploy in a war zone at some point? It's stressful to do that. How do you keep moving forward? Do you think there's some people outside of the military who could absolutely use those skills to get ahead? 100% they could, right? So you have an expertise in you. It's just a matter of, are you willing to go put that in front of somebody and then make an offer to them?
Right.
That would be an example of taking something totally from scratch without an audience at all and being able to launch a business based around it.
And I think it's worth it to say too, because this is somewhere where I was stuck in my mind for a really long time, is feeling like I wasn't enough of an expert. But if there's one thing that I've learned with other coaches that I've worked with in the past and seeing their growth since I worked with them, it's that you can still help someone where you are at now. And
Yeah.
it's okay to experience your own personal growth and continue to help people at the different levels that you achieve as a person, but not thinking that now isn't a good enough time. Because man, I spent such a long time in that place before I finally decided to take the leap and say, okay, like maybe in my mind, I feel like this is very low level, but to some other people, because what I am launching my business in the world of is teaching other people how to podcast, because I've now been doing it for 2.5 years. And to me, in my mind, it seems like, okay, well, for me, this is really easy, but I forget that there was a point in my life where I thought this was really hard. And I
Right.
reached out to someone else who thought it was really easy, and I found value in that too. And so I just wanted to point that out for the people that might be doubting themselves.
There's also a different level of access, right? We've used some big names in our marketplace, right? But some of you, for those of you listening, there's somebody that you look up to who you might say is like a guru, quote unquote, and whatever it is that you like to learn about.
Right.
Once you get to a certain level, it's hard to work. The first coach I worked with, now, I am guessing at this, it probably cost $250,000 to work with him, just because that's how valuable his time is. It's hard to reach him. And there's different ways to engage, and he's got all kinds of products, but I can't get direct feedback. It'll be somebody else on his staff. You're an expert. You can give direct access to people. You can absolutely help them. And one of the good way, I'll use 2 different examples, but one of them, like there's this movie that came out, it's based on a book based on the life of Frank Abagnale Jr. called Catch Me If You Can. He was a famous con man, right? He was doing bank and check fraud. Right. And what he would do is he would move around the country and he would take different positions, right? And he would pretend to be a lawyer, and he would pretend to be a doctor, and he would do all these things. And while he was cashing fake checks, right? And then he would just keep moving so that they couldn't catch him, because back then we didn't have the internet the way we do now. So he would stay somewhere for a little while and then just move on. one of the things that he did while he was doing that, and he actually ended up going on to work with the FBI to help them catch other fraudsters, right? So, because he was an expert at it. So, an example of using your expertise in a different way. But they asked him about one of the things he did was he was a college professor. And at the time when he was doing it, he would have been like 19 years old, right? So imagine a 19-year-old kid back in like the 50s or whenever this took place, right? Just being a college professor. Like, when you think of a college professor, you think of like old,
Right.
65-year-old tenure, don't care about things anymore, right? Most of the time we don't. The movies are great. Sometimes they show us like a young person who's got a bunch of energy, but I went to college. I didn't see anybody who was jumping up on the
Oh,
tables,
no,
right?
not
Like
at
Robin
all.
Williams, right? So, and I don't mean to disparage all the college professors. I certainly had some good ones, but they weren't like super high energy, fun, like super young looking people, right?
Yep.
So he's 19 and like nobody noticed. Nobody was like, "You're not a college professor." And so they asked him, they're like, "How did you get away with that?" And his answer was, "Well, I always read one chapter ahead." He was just like, they were on chapter 1, I was on chapter 2. So he was like an expert to them and he could help them get through chapter 2. And for those of us, like, don't compare the fact that you are a chapter 2 person right now to the fact that somebody else is a chapter 20 person. There are people at chapter 1 that can't get to chapter 2. And you can help them do that in many ways. It doesn't have to be coaching like what I might recommend. It doesn't have to be consulting. It could be literally like, do you know how to, operate a wrench? Some people don't know how to do that. People need help. I know for some people, if you were on staff positions like I was, do you know how to use like online operation tools like Excel or Microsoft, right? There's lots of people who still don't know how to do that. Can you help them? You sure can. And that's the kind of the key part, is that you don't necessarily have to be like a world-renowned expert, right? Dagan, you wouldn't know him. He's got an interesting name. I don't hear a lot of people named Dagan, but if you met him in the street, you wouldn't know who he was. But for those 20 people, they were interested in learning what he could help them to do. And then he just made an offer to them. And the rest is going to be rock and roll history as he's building out that business. And now has a whole new different way of doing business. He still has his other one, but I'm imagining very shortly, because he's still in his process of growing, but he's probably going to move full time to speaking and coaching
That's incredible.
because he can.
That is incredible and so life-changing for people that may think that they're stuck where they're at. And there's a lot of veterans who are stuck. I know there are, because I see them all the time kind of joking with dark humor on the internet about, whatever, whether it's their career or lack of purpose or, insert reason here why a veteran might feel stuck. There's a lot of power in just knowledge alone. And that's what I love about this platform of this podcast, is being able to bring incredible people like you on here to give veterans options. And it's true. I mean, it's people don't often know where to look, right? Like, it's the information's out there. We live in the information age, but there's so much information out there. It's like, well, where do I search? Like, where do I start on YouTube? What book do I read first? Who do I talk to first? And there are so many gurus out there that have information to sell. And I have fallen prey many times to people who just weren't the right fit for me. It's not that they weren't a good coach or weren't, an expert in their field, but I didn't know where to start. And I trusted that that person could help me. And so I think bringing on to this show specifically people that can give at least direction, right? Like, maybe not everyone wants to do exactly what you're talking about today, but now their minds are opened up to something different. And that's really what changed my life back in 2020 when I first started to enter the world of business. And I started in the world of network marketing. But that is what that proximity is, being around people that were my age that lived a different life. I was like, oh, I don't have to be 60 years old to retire and travel the world and live my best life, because that's truly what my mindset was, this is how life goes. I mean, I'm a 90s baby. So the life was like, you go to high school, you graduate, you go to college, you work your career until you're 60 years old, you retire, and then you die. It's like, just hearing the possibility in that there is a different way to live a different life, and that it's not just set aside for the celebrities or the trust fund babies. Like, the possibility is there. I mean, that alone is so incredibly life-changing. So I did want to ask you, Justin, where can people find you and how can they reach out to you and how can we best support you?
Yeah. So the best way to reach out to me, listen, if you're interested in learning more, and you listen, I may be talking about things that are big. And so for some of you, it may not be right. If it is right for you, if you want a path where you can leverage your expertise and you can actually truly serve people at a high level. When I do this, I really want it to be something where we're helping the helpers, like I said, and you can actually dream fearlessly. One of the things that I struggled with when I wanted to have my own business was like, oh, I'm not allowed to. I haven't done enough where I'm allowed to do some big thing. It's going to be small first. And the truth is that was so wrong. And it was just I hate the term limiting belief, but that's what it was. It doesn't what if you could just have everything that you want? And maybe it looks a little different than how you initially perceived it. What if we could do that? Right? What if we could go conquer obstacles, right? What if we could just knock down those barriers? And then you can literally step into becoming who you were meant to be. That's what I cared about. And so that's the things I like to do. And this is the number one way I know how to do it, is taking your expertise and taking it to the market where people can actually get what they want through what you are able to provide them. And the best way to do that is to give an experience, an immersive experience that's fun, and so that they can take you up on taking the next steps with you if it's right for them. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can go find my website at www.thechargeforward.com. I'll give it to you, Rachel, so when you post it, you can share it with them too. But there's a little video on there. You can see a little bit more about what I do. It's a little short one. And then if you want to schedule some time with me or learn some more info, there's some buttons right there on the page. Or you can find me on socials. I'm usually Justin Boyle.
Awesome. Well, I will, as always, make sure to post all that info in the show notes for anyone who wants to just check out what Justin is doing. And, even if you want to save it for the future or pass it on to someone who, who might be interested, or this might be life-changing for them, sharing is the best way to change other people's lives. I mean, just your network alone, you never know who needs to hear this information. And I hear my listeners hear me say this constantly because it's so true. I mean, you might not need something, but you never know who in your circle needs to hear that thing. And hearing that thing might change their life. And we don't always hear about the lives we've changed by simply sharing something, but the world of social media and the internet is so powerful. And a button alone, as crazy as it sounds, could be incredibly life-changing for people that need that information at that right time. So Justin, I am so appreciative that you came on the show to share this value. I really hope that people do reach out and just experience what life could look like on the other side of fear, on the other side of the military mindset, or wherever they may be stuck, or maybe they already have that solid mindset. They just need something different. So thank you, though, from the bottom of my heart for just taking the time to share that value. And I'd lastly just want to ask if there are any last words or pieces of advice that you want to leave the listeners with today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to share a story really quick and just give you some perspective. And this is all built around a quote from a Hall of Fame golfer. Right. His name was Walter Hagen. And he used to say he had a different philosophy about how to play the game of golf. And it was really about how he approached his life as well. Many times when I look at people who are really successful in anything, there's a matter of consistency, right? And it's a matter of structure, and they're doing all the right things all the time. And that can feel a little bit daunting to live up to, even for those of us in the military who are used to structure. And so some of you, and many times you may be listening, that you've been trying something or you felt stuck for a long time and you don't know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, or that you'll ever really make it to what your dream life is. And you're feeling like maybe it's time to settle for something, or because I know I was there at that point. But if you are wondering if there's a chance, I want to encourage you with these words. And this is what always helps me, because sometimes I do things and they don't work, right? And that's okay. But Walter Hagen's philosophy and his quote was that 3 lousy shots and 1 brilliant shot still makes par. And so you have a brilliant shot in you in some way. It may be the way that I'm talking about it, but it might be something different. You're never out of the game, and you just got to keep making plays. So don't leave your brilliant shot in the bag. Let's keep going forward, or maybe say charge forward if I can, since that's the name of my is there. But that's my last word for you. Remember the famous words of Walter Hagen: 3 lousy shots and 1 brilliant shot still makes par.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters,
Your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.